Also, there's some supplementary material for this next one, which I have to show people, because it'll help to contextualize what the fuck it is. I'm gonna post this in chat for the people who are reading with me. There we go. There we go. This is donkey.base. It is relevant to this story.
It looks like one of those.
Okay.
It looks like one of those creepypastas about the 8-bit games.
Well, this is one of the earliest PC games. So this fic is one of mine. It is called "It Works Some of the Time, All of the Time." We are going to. I will narrate it. We're also going to need a June and a Roxy.
Can I be June?
You absolutely can. Who wants to be a Roxy?
Fuck yeah.
I'll be Roxy.
Cool. So this is it's a little short drabble. It's on Earthsea. It's not in any particular timeline or AU. It's general audiences, no archive warnings, June and Roxy. We've got June, Roxy, and mentions of Dad Egbert. Additional tags are donkey.base, nostalgia, memories, Earthsea, IBM, computers, programming, old games, trans female character, POV female character, POV trans character, LGBTQ female character. I wrote this because I jokingly suggested that I look to see if anyone had written any fanfic for donkey.base as in a voice call, and of course no one had, so this is now the only donkey.base fanfiction in existence. I will explain more of the background for this story when we finish. Summary: June Egbert tries to convince Roxy Lalonde that this was...
to have donkey.base appear as a fandom, then?
Oh my god.
Oh, no.
I need to make a donkey sona.
God. June Egbert tries to convince Roxy Lalonde that this was, at one point in time, the greatest and most important computer game of them all. A quick short character story about nostalgia and memories. Roxy laughed, punctuating it with a short snort as she clapped her hands to her mouth.
Oh, June, you gotta tell me something.
She walked over to the computer and slapped it lightly with an open palm.
What's up with this piece of shit?
She laughed again, more to show that she wasn't being serious about calling the computer a piece of shit than anything else. June glanced at her wife closely, narrowing her eyes and shaking her head. Roxy wasn't going to be able to fully understand, to get why it mattered so much to June that she'd been able to alchemize a fully functional IBM PC-AT, complete with the basic software that had once been loaded on it by her father. Not that Roxy couldn't get the basic idea, but that she would understand the way that the nostalgia caught in June's throat and made her start to tear up. She couldn't quite get how this piece of shit was important to June Egbert's childhood.
It's the first computer I ever had.
She grinned, then scrunched her face up quickly.
Well, first computer that my dad had, I guess.
June shrugged and reached out to power the computer on. The power button depressed with a click, and the computer's fan immediately whirred to life.
Why is it making that noise?
Roxy asked, her brow furrowed.
Is it supposed to be making that noise?
The computer was clicking and grinding, a noise which June knew was a perfectly, mostly normal result of the booting process. She set it up in the corner of their living room in a spot that she was fairly certain wouldn't result in it overheating or forcing anyone to trip over it.
Give it a minute,
she said brightly, squinting at the computer's monitor. It usually booted up in a few minutes. Usually.
Okay, maybe give it like 15 minutes? 20?
Sure, babe.
Roxy said cheerfully.
I'll be back in a few.
She leaned in to kiss June on the cheek before heading out the door. June screwed her face up in an expression of mock indignation, then sighed and put her head down on the desk.
Who says that?
June.
Okay, it'll be just a few minutes.
It was, in fact, the full 20 minutes before the computer finally finished booting up, although June never saw the actual process because she fell quickly asleep, her head resting next to the vintage off-white keyboard as the computer's ancient processor struggled to bring it to whirring, quick clicking life. June slumbered for some time, until a sharp knock on the door frame to the room brought her consciousness rushing back in a blurry haze.
The Still waiting?
June blinked thickly and sat up in her chair, looking around the room. In front of her, she saw the deep green glow of the cathode ray tube monitor, punctuated only by 3 familiar characters marked on the screen in brilliant glowing green. Sitting up excitedly, June motioned for Roxy to come into the room.
No, it just finished booting.
Roxy walked into the room and bent over next to June. She could see the skeptical look on her wife's face.
It just finished booting after an hour?
Well,
June started, then stopped, then smiled and continued.
it just finished booting after. I'm not sure. I think I fell asleep.
She grinned sheepishly and shrugged.
So what's so special about this ancient dust box, Junie?
Roxy leaned in and playfully elbowed her shoulder.
This baby has, what, like 1 RAM in it?
No, it's got 640K of RAM in it and maybe 1 megabyte hard drive.
Roxy snorted and leaned in toward June.
Nice joke, June.
She paused and studied June's face.
Oh, you're not joking.
Look, it was a big deal at the time.
She pursed her lips. It wasn't strictly true that it had been a big deal at the time that June had seen the computer. She was pretty sure that her dad had found the thing in the attic, and by 2004 it was outdated by at least 20 years. In hindsight, that was probably why it took so long to boot up, given that the alchemized copy was perfectly replicating the version of the computer from June's childhood, not the original PC.
Okay,
June corrected herself.
maybe it wasn't a big deal to anyone else, but it was a big deal to me. This was the first computer I ever got a chance to have. My dad said that I could use it as much as I wanted.
Roxy made a non-committal noise, the kind of noise that insinuated, if you're happy, I'm happy, and knelt down on the floor next to June's chair, propping her elbows on the desk and smiling.
Okay, Junie. So what games can this baby run? Doom?
June laughed to herself. The very idea of it.
No, not even close.
Huh.
But what it can run is donkey-date.base.
She pronounced the last bit like dot base and ended her sentence with a little flourish of her hand, but Roxy didn't look suitably impressed.
Junie, honey, I don't know what that is.
Okay, well, so it's the first video game I ever saw. I mean, it's kind of a video game?
She frowned. It was more of a technical demo for an ancient programming language than an actual game.
Well, sort of. You play as my dad said it was a tractor, but I always pretended it was a race car. So anyway, you have to avoid donkeys?
Avoid donkeys.
Roxy sounded intrigued but skeptical.
That's what you have to do.
Yeah, and you drive the race car, and you don't want to hit the donkeys.
She ignored the, "Oh, of course you don't want to do that," muttered under Roxy's breath and continued.
And then, well, that's basically it. Drive a car, don't hit the donkeys.
Sounds epic, Junie.
June ignored the sarcasm in the remark and tapped in the commands to run the program. The once familiar sequence of keys that had once opened up a world full of the possibilities of creation to her. The basic A programming language, lines neatly numbered and arranged in rows. She smiled to herself as she input the commands to run the program, and a brief wave of nostalgia ran over her.
Well, it does look like a race car.
Roxy said quietly as the image displayed on the screen in all of its limited resolution, monochromatic glory.
Nice.
June smiled to herself and started to play the game, guiding the maybe tractor, probably car, along the pixelated road, avoiding the equally pixelated donkeys. June nodded.
I mean, it's simple. I know it's simple, but it was the first game I ever played. That means something to me.
She cut herself off as the on-screen vehicle collided with a donkey, and the PC's onboard speaker let out a harsh blat of noise. And all of a sudden, June was in tears. She leaned back in her chair, eyes watering, barely able to hold back a sob. A look of worry on her face, Roxy immediately put her arms around June's shoulders and squeezed.
Junie? June? Are you okay, hon? What happened? It's just a game, babe. The donkey's not real, okay?
June smiled through the tears, choked down a sob, and shook her head.
No, it's not that.
Babe?
She took a deep breath, and the memories washed over her. Sitting down together in front of the glowing screen, another laptop opened nearby for reference, typing the commands one character at a time, hunting for the keys on the keyboard. A year before she would learn to touch type. Her dad was sitting next to her, his always patient face turned up in a smile. He was telling June what to type, looking at the laptop. June started, took a deep breath, and continued.
The sound. I added the sound. It was the first thing I ever coded. I was like 8, and my dad was helping me out. He'd never used BASIC before, but he was really trying.
She stopped and took another breath. This time it caught in her throat and she shuddered.
He was always really trying.
Next to her, Roxy sighed and leaned her forehead against the side of June's head. When she spoke, the breath tickled June's ears softly.
Babe, that's really sweet. Are you gonna be okay?
June nodded. The wave had broken, and she was starting to calm herself down again. The memories were still there, a nostalgia so keen that it cut like a knife blade. But she was dealing with it now. She couldn't live in those memories, didn't want to live in those memories, but she didn't mind visiting a while. Even if it hurt, she didn't want to forget how she'd felt.
I'm okay, Rox. Just a lot of stuff coming back all at once. Yeah?
Good stuff or bad stuff?
June hesitated. It wasn't a question she'd been prepared to answer, and she honestly wasn't sure what the answer was. So much had been wrong when she was a child, but she couldn't deny that at least this one memory felt more like a safe haven than the reminder of the raw edges of the real world was so often contained.
Just stuff, I think.
Roxy nodded as if this were an actual answer, and hugged June tight, planting a kiss on her temple.
Okay, babe. As long as you're okay.
Yeah.
June let the word fade off as she smiled.
Yeah, I think I am.
Alrighty.
That was so good.
That was
Thank
really
you.
nice.
So
Yeah.
for
That was
context,
really cute.
if it wasn't clear from the very specific details, I had a computer that matches that description and played Donkey.Bass, although the sound was originally in the game. And we took the computer down out of the attic a few years later to try to get it to work again, and I turned it on, and it just kind of never booted up again because it had been up in the attic for so long.
Oh my gosh.
That sounds familiar.
It was not a good computer. It literally did. It had the minimum amount of RAM, and it had a 1 megabyte hard drive, which for its model was an amazing upgrade. Probably was a computer that was outdated in the early 80s, to be quite honest.
I feel like it was outdated when it was made.